Bismillah ar-Rahman Rahim. Good morning and welcome to the BIBF's Virtual HR Disruption Forum. Under the patronage of the Central Bank of Bahrain, this forum is powered by Al Salam Bank Bahrain and aims at giving you insights on best practices during these challenging times, such as the global coronavirus pandemic that has taken the world by storm. On behalf of the BIBF and Al Salam Bank, I'm Amal Al-Sarani, and I'll be your host this morning throughout the forum. Once again, we are delighted to welcome you all, and your presence with us today is what really makes this forum a success. We have a lineup of renowned international experts who will be sharing their perceptions and advice on how to overcome obstacles during these uncertain times. And first off, please join me in welcoming the Forum Chairman, Mr. Yusuf Ali, Head of Leadership and Management at the BIBF. Over to you, Yusuf.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, ladies. Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you very much for your time. We're hoping that everyone has something to take away from the next few hours. But before we start, I'd like, on behalf of the BIBF and our strategic partner in this event, the Salam Bank, I'd like to thank the Central Bank for their patronage of this key event. And I'd like to make a special mention of a Salam Bank for making this event possible. They've generously supported this event with their time, with their effort, and they made sure that this event is free for everyone to attend. By now, they have built a reputation for being a promoter of knowledge and learning in the marketplace, and by all means, their value and impact is not limited to themselves. They're continuously supporting such drives, and we're very thankful to them. Our main aim today is to bring about expert insights to help us, to help yourselves navigate through these new realities and the new normal, and to try to figure out what best works for yourself and for your organizations. As you all know, the coronavirus, this current pandemic, continues to disrupt society around the world, becoming not only part of a major health crisis, but a major economic dilemma in a kind of a way. However, on a more sort of positive note, this current situation also sparked a surge in innovation. It drove digitalization in a much faster pace. It's also asking serious questions of existing norms, assumptions, organizational design, systems, and processes. And it's looking very likely that these effects will continue long before this pandemic is over. The changing expectations of employees, the unexpected outcomes of remote working, the implications of these changes for yourselves, for the leaders, for people who are in the industry, once again is asking serious questions of whether we have to look back at what we're doing. The expectations of employees are changing as well as the unexpected outcomes of remote working and the implications of these changes for leaders. Virtual working, for example, one big phrase that we hear every day is here to stay, and organizations should now find ways to develop this and other capabilities, of course, in new and more innovative ways to examine and uncover ways to deliver more and to be more productive as well. Therefore, the importance of such things as coaching, engagement, empowerment, commitment, and performance in virtual team management as the modern workplace rapidly evolves and perspectives and outlooks transform. The importance of these elements is more apparent than ever. We all know that by now that the current pandemic requires extraordinary strengths in dealing with work changes and life challenges, and the importance of therefore the mental health as well in the workplace and the psychological well-being of teams and members, and how employers will need to manage this is at the top of the agenda. Also, faced with the daunting task of continuing operations through a period that requires remote workers and the difficulties that we see with supply chains, some organizations have turned to lean-based ideas. In some cases, they've coupled process improvement with technology and intelligent automation, and others, some have resorted to more sort of old school techniques. Again, we're going to give some time to talk about this today. This forum, without taking any longer, the HR Disruption Forum is brought to you by the BIBF. BIBF has been around for quite a while, almost 40 years, and we continue to provide the platform for learning, development, and to provide the means for you to be ahead of the game and to make sure that every help you require, whether ideas, inspiration, or insight, we provide it to you. So thanks to you once again for providing the time. Thanks very much to As-Salam Bank and as well the Central Bank of Bahrain for patronizing this, for the patronage of this event. Stay tuned for a day filled with fantastic insights, opinions, and expertise from around the world. We have attendees from more than 20 or more countries in the world, speakers who have been in the business for years and years. So enjoy your day, the next few hours, enjoy the amazing presentations, and we wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
Of today's topics on our agenda. We will have 3 segments in our forum today: trends, realities, and opportunities. The topics will be key trends for HR professionals, coaching for resilience in times of disruption, virtual team management, importance of mental health in the workplace, team development in the digital era, gamification, and transforming HR processes using the Lean Six Sigma way. Please note that we will have a 5-minute window for your questions or queries right after each session. First off, please join me in welcoming our keynote speaker, Mr. Alex Furman, occupational psychologist and visiting lecturer at the University of York, who will discuss key trends for HR professionals. Over to you, Alex.
Well, thank you very much indeed for giving me a bit of time today. This is an exciting time for people in my profession, and in a way we've never been busier. So I thought I would put together some analysis of the trends, data, and research findings relating to things that HR professionals would need to be aware of as we kind of go into as we come out of 2020 and into a new decade. But also I think these key points will also be pretty useful for anybody who is leading, running a business, or even actually trying to work out what career path they should follow at the moment. So I think that the findings that I'm putting together here, although specifically as this has been put together for HR professionals, they have wider application than that. Okay, and I will jump in. All I will say is please do fire me any thoughts as you go. I can see the chat, I can see the conversation. So please do give me any thoughts as we go along, and I'll try as best I can. I'm not a great multitasker, I'll warn you, but I'll do as best I can to tackle any questions that come up as we go through the session. And I do have a couple of questions for you as well. So if you're watching this, please do feel free to interact. Okay, I'm off. So I've tried to structure this session. Obviously, it's a pretty big topic, but I've tried to break it down into 4 key areas. As we look into the future product, future customer, future employee, and then finally the future leader. So trends that really relate to these 4 areas have made up the core subject matter for this presentation. Okay. And in terms of my references, there's a huge amount of research which has been done. If I was a millennial, I would probably have gone to the hard data, and I would have done some sort of regression analysis and done something extremely clever with data science for you. However, I'm not, so I haven't. But what I have done is I've drawn in the data from a number of different organizations, and I've analyzed their analysis, essentially. So this is a meta-analysis of trends which these organizations are predicting will impact the world of work in 2021 and beyond. And I don't think there are any huge surprises here, but there are definitely things to be aware of. Okay. So I have a question for you just to think about, and I will invite any thoughts in the chat function. Can I just check every participant, can the participants engage with the chat box? Just give me a thumbs up if they can, if everyone can do that. Are we okay to can every participant engage in the chat? Is that right? Yeah. So what has changed most for you in 2020? Can I just ask everybody who's watching this, just have a little think about that question and give me your thoughts in the chat box. What is the #1 thing in the world of work that has changed for you this year? What's the main thing? And just put any thoughts in that chat box. I will take any ideas at all. Okay. And here's another question for you. Do you think the impact of change will be mostly positive or mostly negative on your organization as we go into the future? So 2021 and beyond, do you think that the impact of change will be mostly positive or mostly negative? What do you think? And just write down somewhere, just think about that scale, with 0 being primarily negative and 10 being primarily positive. What do you think? How do you think change is going to affect your organization? Or are you somewhere in the middle? Something to think about. Okay. So I want to begin by thinking about or introducing this concept of the future product. So this is central really to the way that organizations are developing. And I've got a couple of little pictures there. I've got a Tesla car. I don't know how in the Gulf region, how many people drive Teslas, but certainly in the UK, they've become incredibly popular and you see them everywhere. And also the latest Apple mobile phone. And what is interesting when you look at the trends around how products are developing, the car actually is closer in many ways to a mobile phone than it is to a traditional car with a petrol engine or a diesel engine. So one of the key developments as products have evolved is the interaction between the product and its owner. And this is enabled by agile working and the continuous improvement mindset. It's also enabled by artificial intelligence and machine learning. So the key thing about a Tesla and what makes a Tesla really different and a significant step forward is the Tesla. If you buy a Tesla car, every time you plug it into the Wi-Fi, it will update itself. I mean, the fact that you plug your car into the Wi-Fi is quite something. But beyond that, actually, that Tesla car will evolve and adapt every time you do that. It'll get sent updates, and those updates will be informed by how you drive it. So if you're a fast driver, your car will get faster as you own it. If you're a careful, frugal driver, and what matters most to you is being able to go a long distance, then your car will become more efficient as you own it. So the car that you buy isn't the car that you're stuck with. The product evolves in response to your ownership. And this is how products are developing now. What you buy isn't fixed. What you buy, the future product, is something that evolves and develops almost in response to your behavior and the feedback that you give it. This is essentially enabled by the Internet of Things. And so as a result, if we think about the what conclusions do we need to draw from that? If you think about, so HR professionals thinking about future skills and a workforce that's able to engage or drive forwards products of this nature, an understanding of data science is key, but also, and perhaps even more so, a high level of creativity will be required to have the idea in the first place. So data science will be necessary in order to execute the idea, but you need creative people in the organization who can have the idea in the first place. These kind of people who have a creative spark and can see the world a little bit differently and create opportunities based on that. It is highly likely that as we go into the future, creativity will be the most sought after skill for future employees. And I saw with some interest that my son is 5 years old, and next year he starts coding. So at school he'll begin coding next year, which I think is quite an interesting sign of the future and how things are going to move for that generation. I'm not quite sure what comes after Generation Z, but anyway. So just moving on from that, and ultimately connected to it, is the trends associated with the future customer. So here we go. Astronomers discover 15-year-old girl is the center of the universe. Well, that's obviously a bit of a silly joke, but not really, actually. In fact, in terms of how the organization needs to think, the customer really is the center of the universe. And there's been a big divide between organizations of the past, the industrial age organizations, which run a little bit like bureaucracies, and they make decisions that are often internal decisions and that benefit the organization but have no impact on the customer whatsoever. The move towards agile working and the growth of agile in organizations, which has really emerged over the last 20 years, has really changed that relationship and that structure. And so organizations are becoming less bureaucratic, more flexible, and ultimately more customer centered in how they think. And of course, a key example of that, and you can probably sort of think about your own organization to a certain extent. You know, are you really customer centric, or do you have a lot of work and a lot of investment that has no impact on the customer? In which case, that will be something to have a look at as we move into the future. But a key example is Amazon, and Amazon have at the heart of their philosophy, at the heart of their culture, they are focused on the customer. They're almost obsessively focused on the customer, and that's really how they've grown and built the business. And this is a myth, but I went to the Amazon headquarters a few years ago, and they really do this. So whenever they have meetings, there's an empty chair, and that empty chair is there to represent the customer in that meeting. And so this is something that Jeff Bezos has driven and is sort of really at the heart of the organization. If a decision won't have any positive impact on the customer or won't improve customer value, they won't do it. It won't happen, because it will just be a waste of resources. It'll take resources away from the main effort or the central point of focus for the organization, which is to improve the world for the customer, to improve customer value, and to delight and amaze customers. And you can see with companies like Amazon how their technology and their orientation is very much towards that, even to the point that they're able to predict what it is that you're going to want to buy next, sometimes even before you do, which is spooky stuff, but there it is. The downside to this, of course, is that they have raised customer expectations. So all companies like Amazon, which are completely customer centric, have raised the expectations of customers, and customers now demand more from organizations. And so if your organization doesn't have the customer at the center of the decision making process, and if you're not improving customer experience, then it is highly likely that customers will go elsewhere. So by raising this this awareness of and raising expectations of customers, it has narrowed the field somewhat, and that's perhaps why we're seeing the world shrink a little bit, so that there are far fewer successful organizations than there used to be, because there are far fewer organizations that are truly customer centric in their thinking. But it's something that the rest of us will catch up with. Okay. So moving on to think about the future employee. So I asked you a moment ago about what has changed most for you. And of course, what is highly likely to have changed is that you will be working from home far more, that you're probably working with far more flexibility. It may be that you're working longer hours, you know, because you're not commuting, not driving anywhere. And also there's no natural separation between the office and home for most of us. So that's highly likely to be, you know, a significant change for most individuals, but also it's been a huge change for HR leaders to have to engage with and deal with. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to have a little bit of discussion about this, about how the impact of change has affected your organization in terms of getting teams working at distance, using virtual technology and all that sort of stuff. So how changes to the work environment have affected your organization is something that I would be really keen to understand. So here's some interesting statistics compiled by the Times newspaper. So 2019, it was on average so this was in the UK. So I think that is worth noting. These are UK statistics, so kind of interesting to see. But I suspect you broadly representative. 2 in 10 people worked from home. In 2020, 8 in 10 people work from home. So that's a shift in a matter of about 3 months. A shift from 20% of people working from home to 80% of people working from home. That's seismic. You know, that sort of change would never happen if there wasn't a critical incident or a serious reason for that change to happen. And of course, that's the COVID trigger that's brought about that seismic change. However, recent polling has suggested that actually, although many people are enjoying working from home, 53% actually stated that they would prefer to have a balance. They want to go to work some days and work from home some days. So actually the just about tipping, it's kind of the majority of the vote stated that they would most prefer to balance it with a little bit of time in the office and a little bit of time at home, which is a significant factor for organizations to consider, as a lot of organizations are starting to think, do we need office space? And it's like, yes, but whether you need as much is a different question. One also useful point, and this is something that doubtless you will talk about more today, 20% of people who are currently struggling with loneliness, and there are mental health and well-being concerns about 1 in 5 at the moment. And of course, that I think one thing that we should take into account is that this current way of working has only been going on for, well, we're into about 4 months now. So that number, 20% now, certainly my prediction would be that if you look at the trends, that well-being, loneliness, working, a sense of isolation will becoming an increasing or growing problem if people continue to work from home in an absolute way. So I would predict that 20% figure will grow as time goes on, unless there is a return to the office and a greater degree of socialization that begins to happen. So just some sort of hard numbers to think about. So here's a question for you. And again, I hope to pick this up afterwards when we kind of when I come to the end of my input and we have a little bit of time for questions and answer. One thing that I would like for you to think about is what would be best for you. And if you write down a number for me, one would be absolutely happy to work from home, and I would love to work from home 100% of the time. 2, a split, 50-50 maybe, or thereabouts. A little bit of time at work in the office, a little bit of time at home. 3, I hate working from home. I would much rather just work at the office all the time. So what most applies to you? Have a little think about that, and it would be really great to get an insight into your answers or what you think, because this is live research. Certainly, the polling that I've seen has actually suggested that 0.2, the 50, round about the 50-50, seems to be most popular for most people. But what would be best for you? Okay, so a little question for you to think about. So when you kind of get into the qualitative analysis on how change is affecting employees at the moment, it is mixed. It's mixed. There's mixed feedback, and so we've got our happy face there, which that's really just a photo from me when I last passed through Bahrain Airport. So there's that sort of smiley face sort of feedback that people gave, which is that people enjoy not commuting. So now, of course, it's different in Bahrain because it's a smaller island, but here in the UK, it's not unusual for people to commute for an hour each way, 2 hours a day commuting. And of course, commuting is very expensive in a lot of places. So a lot of people have been very pleased with not having to commute, and that's been extremely positive. People generally enjoy greater flexibility around working hours, which has been necessary, of course, because people have had young children at home. And like certainly in my case, you have to balance work with occasionally doing a shift as a primary school teacher, and also to try and sort of stop your children from vandalizing your house and that sort of thing. So you have to kind of balance the day job with home demands, more so than we've ever had to do in the past, perhaps. And of course, a lot of people around, and again, certainly going to the UK, it's extremely difficult to buy a puppy at the moment because they've all been bought. A lot of people are working on the assumption that this is going to carry on for the future. And so a lot of people are able to get a dog, and that's a wonderful thing. It might be less wonderful when we do have to go back to work, but in which case our dog walking businesses will do extremely well. A lot of people are also buying chickens, which is interesting, and I'm not sure that that's necessarily a good idea. Anyway, we'll see how that plays out in the longer term. So there's some really positive feedback that's coming back from the kind of current working arrangement, but there's also some grumpy face, more negative feedback that's coming back as well in the qualitative research. And this is all very live, because we've only been into this situation for a few months. It's the feedback is the research which has been done on this is quite industry focused. None of this is peer reviewed, but it is it's indicative, certainly. Longer hours requiring stricter parameters. So people are generally working longer hours than they were before. And what's also really interesting is that a lot of people are finding it difficult to draw the line between work and home or home time. And it's sort of, so what happens is that work tends to encroach into evenings and weekends, and actually from a well-being and sustainability point of view, that's likely to present challenges going forwards. And so I just want to come back to my previous point that the well-being issue, if we are going to continue in this way for many more months, that well-being at work will become a bigger and bigger issue. Loneliness is one thing. Burnout will be another thing to watch for, and certainly Zoom fatigue, which I think is a subset of burnout, is something that I think a lot of us have probably already felt. So loneliness and well-being challenges are going to be significant. Another important consideration is the challenges of trying to form a business culture. And this is incredibly important if you hire young people, people who you want to develop a certain set of professional values in. Whether that can be achieved only through virtual working is to be is to be discovered, but it seems highly unlikely. That actually it's very difficult to form a culture, a business culture, without bringing people together in the same building and creating an environment for people to work in. As I said, whether that can be achieved virtually hasn't really been tested. It would be great to have your point of view on that. My suspicion is that it isn't really, and that if you want to develop people, if you want to kind of grow talent, thinking about succession planning, grow future leaders, you need an organizational culture to shape that. And whether that can be achieved virtually, I doubt. So my feeling is that there is a future for the office and for bringing people together, maybe not all the time, but certainly some of the time, so that a business culture can develop and you get all the many the many benefits that come from that. Okay. So my next point is thinking about who is following. So who is in the organization? And here's an interesting statistic. So at the moment, millennials represent approximately 30% of the workforce. It varies a little bit from which country you look at, but that seems to be broadly right. So millennials, so people who I think born in about 1980 onwards, represent 38%. And again, if you look at some interesting research actually, which was compiled by PricewaterhouseCoopers on what are the priorities. So if millennials are these, increasingly growing proportion of the workforce, what is it that they're interested in and what do they really want? And actually their priorities, more than remuneration, so more than pay, priorities for millennials are development. So professional development, learning and development are key engagement tools to, first of all, bring in the talent and also to keep it. They're also interested, millennials are also interested in rapid career progression. They may be less patient than our previous generation, so the baby boomers and Generation X, which is where I land, who perhaps more willing to work your way up steadily through the organization. There may be less patience for that to work within parameters and structures as the workforce changes, which is again is something to think about. So a degree of fast-paced expectation is something to think about for HR managers and leaders generally, I think. Millennials strongly favor flexible working. So again, what I don't have is when I looked at those previous statistics, what I don't know is to what extent those numbers were made up of millennials. We haven't got granularity of the data, but it's certainly the case that qualitatively, millennials prefer flexible working to rigid industrial 9-to-5 sort of working. Most interestingly for me, actually, is the importance of organizational values, purpose, and corporate social responsibility in terms of the organizations that millennials will be attracted to and that millennials will want to work with. So this concept of values alignment is increasingly significant. So the millennial workforce, and I guess as we move into Generation Z, we might see even more of this. It's looking for organizations that have a strong environmental agenda, that support their communities rather than just make money, and that essentially are ethical and purpose-led in how the organizations work and do business. So the why for organizations is something to think about now. And if it's just about shareholder value, just about creating money, that's unlikely to excite or engage the millennial workforce. strong sets of principles and values, an ethical focus, corporate social responsibility, engaging with and improving the world has become a significant necessity for organisations if they want to attract the best and the brightest talent that is coming into the workforce today. So, and again, a question for you, I guess, is do you do that? Do you have are you purpose-led? Do you have a kind of a corporate social responsibility agenda? Are you creating social value as well as just commercial value? Something to think about. And of course, opportunities. Well, you know, there are tremendous opportunities at the moment in terms of with virtual working. So when I look at my own organisation, I can hire people who are anywhere in the world, and we can collaborate through Teams, just as we are now, or Zoom, or all these wonderful tools. So actually, the talent pool has widened, and although the skills that we need have perhaps become a little bit more narrow, so priorities are creativity and understanding of data science. On the flip side of that, our talent pool that we can draw from has become much wider. That process started before COVID for sure, but COVID has accelerated it astronomically as employers and employees all begin to understand that working virtually is possible. And maybe working 100% of the time virtually is possible. Although going back to my concerns about organizational culture and the development of values in people, whether that's really what you want to do is a different question. But when you recruit from an international pool, that gives you a deeper understanding of international markets and international customers. So actually, for organizations that wish to work internationally rather than just regionally, being able to draw from an international pool of talent will enable that, and that will open doors which may well have been closed before. In the past, we used to spend an awful lot of time jumping on airplanes and flying around the place. But actually, just as we're doing this, I'm giving you this presentation from my little study in Yorkshire, and it's great. And I think this has been enabled. So this has been the great opportunity that's been presented by COVID, is this ability to reach people, reach international markets without even leaving your own home. Much less spending nights in airports and getting very red eyes as a result. So the opportunities are immense if we're set up and we're ready to engage with them. So here's a little question for you. In order to really exploit the opportunities that are in front of us, what do you think the most important characteristic of future leaders will be? So if we think about leaders going into 2020 and beyond, what do you think the most important characteristic will be? And I don't think I can't see your responses to this straight away, but I would be great to have your thoughts on this. And as I said, we're going to move into a little bit of Q&A in just a moment, but that's something maybe just to think about. So thinking about the dynamic situation that we're in and the opportunities that presents, what do you think the most important characteristic of leaders will be? And here are just a few thoughts for you on that question. There's a emerging idea called generative leadership, and it's probably going to be the key leadership concept for the next few years, certainly. So generative leaders bring people together to create communities of learning. So they're very much, rather than giving direction and being, the hero leader who everybody follows, follow me, that sort of single voice, the world, because of the changing dynamic of the world, the complexity of problems, the multicultural nature of working today, that's very unlikely to be successful outside of a micro business or a microcosm. So stronger focus on diversity of perspectives and opinions. Again, in working in more complex environments, more difficult problems, and a international focus. Widening the voices in the team is all important. So a greater focus on diversity of perspectives and opinions. Who's in your team? Does everybody agree on everything? Does everybody share the same perspective, or do you have a little bit of dissent, and respectful challenge necessary to improve outcomes and thinking? So the role of the leader is to create psychological safety in the group, and this will enable healthy discussion and debate. Sometimes not always that healthy, actually, but that's much better than everybody just agreeing, because everybody can just agree on a bad idea. Groupthink. Broad range of ideas and perspectives and respectful challenge. And again, in our ever more complex environment, dealing with problems that don't have solutions, so strategic problems that don't have solutions, what we do need to do is really open up the discussion and increase the perspective to improve and refine how we're working and the decisions that we're coming up with. So if you think about this, the evolution of leadership, I guess, and probably in the 20th century, great leadership might have been represented by people like Ernest Shackleton, Google him, but essentially heroic leaders who were brilliant at leading their teams in a two-dimensional sense. So leaders who always had the right answer and that everybody would follow, and worked extremely well in hierarchies. The hero leader, maybe from the 20th century, to this more collaborative model of leadership, which is about building skills, knowledge and sharing, communities of learning, and that leadership has evolved really from giving direction to creating psychologically safe environments where everybody, regardless of your background, can contribute, can challenge and be heard. Psychological safety, and I suspect that is probably a much more valid model in 2020 than the more traditional views of the trait leadership views, perhaps represented by Ernest Shackleton and co. So just in summary, creativity will be key and probably the most sought after quality or skill in the future employee. There's going to be a lot of competition to attract the creative minds into organizations as we go into the future. It's absolute necessity to have a focus on the customer. Amazon and organizations like that have changed the game. They've changed the playing field. It's no longer a level playing field. Amazon has changed people's expectations. And so if we're not customer centered in our decision making, if we're not driven by improving customer value, then it's highly likely that we'll be relevant to our customers in the near future. It's predicted, interesting, looking at research from McKinsey, many organizations are going to experience a skill gap by 2025, and so they need to work hard to attract the necessary skills. As things are emerging so fast in terms of the changing product and the changing customer, the necessity for creativity and an understanding of data science to execute those plans, and by 2025, that's expected to be a critical problem that organizations will either be able to solve or they won't. But if they are going to solve it, they need to think carefully about the culture that they develop and being an attractive place for the best and the brightest creative minds to come and join them. And my last point, successful future leaders will need humility. That's the word that I keep on coming across, and I think it's got to be right as we think about the future. It's not decisiveness, it's not IQ, it's not qualities of the hero leader, it's humility and the ability to ask rather than tell. Create environments where people can contribute and a broad range of perspectives can be invited into the discussion to develop optimal solutions that will take your organization into a multicultural future. Email address, I'm on LinkedIn. I have shared quite a lot of research in the last 6 weeks or so. The research which I've compiled to sort of put into this presentation, I've shared on LinkedIn. So please find me there. It'd be great to connect with you. As I said, all the kind of ideas that I've drawn on into this, and as the research and the thinking evolves, I'm going to keep it up to date. I'm going to keep passing it through, and that's my email address as well. If anybody's got any thoughts that you'd like to pick up with me, please do get in touch. And I very much hope to hear from you as we move into this exciting and dynamic future. Thank you very much. So let me just have a look at this. Oh, I can see David Collins. Hello, David. Hello, David. How are you? David's just popped up on my screen. That's excellent. What am I doing now? Am I just handing straight over, or are we going to have any questions and answer? Not sure. Amal, would you mind just giving me a bit of a steer on that? I've got you on my screen as well. So we're going to have a little bit of Q&A, right? Okay, so are those going to be typed in questions, or are we going to do that verbally, the old-fashioned way? Q&A, okay. Okay, so, all right. Okay, so to that end, then we've got a little bit of time for question and answer. Should we just have a couple of questions? Q&A show, right? Just bear with me a second. Just show Q&A. There we go. Got it. Fabulous. Ah, okay. Got it. Ah, I've got some lovely feedback there. Yes, I'm sorry to everybody who gave feedback. Thank you very much indeed. I was just, this is, I would have loved to have actually engaged with it. So what I can see is that a lot of people are saying that there's opportunity both ways, which I think is right. You know, I'm looking at the feedback that I had there, mostly positive. A little bit of uncertainty, could go either way, seems to be what you're saying. So there's opportunity both ways. Sadiq, thank you very much for that. Okay. So working from home, everything is online. So we work in the educational sector. We've had to adapt to the new situation quickly. I bet you did. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to. In fact, I've had so many comments that it's going to take me a second just to get to the question and answer section. Just bear with me a moment. Right, okay. So let me just have a look at this. Right, I'm going to need to just shift my screens around a little bit so I can do this better and have a look at your questions. Okay, Kimmy, thank you. So what do you see as the role of emotional intelligence as a skill for future leaders? That's a great question, Kimmy. Thank you very much. Yes, so emotional intelligence is fundamentally about being able to understand and regulate our own emotions, but also to engage with, understand, and manage the emotions of others. Interesting research has shown that decisions can't be made effectively without emotion. So emotions are critical to making decisions. But I suppose there's a little bit of a paradox that opens up here, is that how do we create psychologically safe environments where people are also encouraged to be emotional or to display emotion? And that is necessary, and I think that there's a bit of a misunderstanding about psychological safety. So psychological safety isn't about having an environment where nobody challenges. Psychological safety is about having an environment where people are free to challenge and also to demonstrate emotion. In that, because you know, if you're not emotional about things, you're probably not thinking really. And so that does present a challenge for leaders to manage those sorts of situations and those environments. If we're welcoming debate and discussion and a degree of emotional engagement, then leaders also need to be able to manage that as well. But I would say more than emotional intelligence, and as I see things evolving into the international world, I think emotional intelligence has to also be supported by cultural intelligence and understanding of different cultures and how different cultures work. Cognitive, understanding of cognitive diversity. So different people. If we're broadening up our teams, so we're going to be joined by people from different cultures, but also people with different working preferences, introverts as well as extroverts, you know, people who are values led as well as people who are commercially focused. And so emotional intelligence can be definitely, but also cultural intelligence as well, to create a safe space for a wide variety of contributors. So I think that's probably you know, it's a big question. Again, I could write you an essay on that, but hopefully that's given you something to think about there. How to avoid the skill gap in an effective way? Yeah, good question. So the skill gap is going to start to hurt in 2025 as the future product. So that basically everybody will expect their product to be a little bit different, and that's, you know, we're seeing that in Tesla cars and that sort of stuff. But now then that's going to be in white goods, fridges, all that sort of stuff. So 2025 is when there's going to be it's predicted to be that tipping point. I think my question for you, I haven't got your name because it's come up as anonymous, but one thing to think about is actually how attractive is your organisation for the bright young things. I went to, on Thursday, I saw a presentation done by a young guy. He was, I'd say 23. He's got a master's degree from the London School of Economics. And his presentation was on future trends of work, similar to what I did, but he didn't consolidate other people's learnings. He took the raw data. He took raw data. He did a load of statistical modelling, and he showed us statistical trends that he'd created himself to show how the world is changing and how the world of work is changing. And that kind of blew my mind. And it's like, I asked him afterwards about how he did it, and I didn't understand his answer. It was all to do with k-means modeling and all this sort of stuff. And it was absolutely mind blowing. And I thought, this suddenly it's almost like, wow, what do we do? Do we go back to school, or do we hope that we'll just about get away with it? Just Generation X's. But that is the future, and that ability to be creative, but also to understand the data that you need, you know, to inform the ever more sophisticated world of work. Those two things are going to be necessary. Do you have an organization that will be attractive and appealing to young people? That this guy, his name was Jack. Would Jack want to go and work for your organization? If the answer is no, probably not, then I think we need to have a really deep look at the culture that we're developing, and how appealing the organization is. But taking that into account, it's not about paying Jack a load of money. It's about offering a lot of development opportunity, real career progression, and also being an organization that does more than just make money. It's being appealing on a more values orientated basis as well. So those are the things to really think about. So thank you for that question. Have I got time for one more? Got time for one more? Yeah. Yes. Okay. So, respective to generative learning, there was a point stating create communities of learning. How do you create such a community? Do you think Abraham Lincoln did it best by knowing his staff on a personal level and taking an interest in them? Abraham Lincoln. Actually, again, Abraham Lincoln is a really interesting guy because he wasn't a hero leader. He was a bit awkward. You know, he was quite a sort of socially awkward character, but he was a very quiet man, a very still man, and an excellent listener. And so, yes, I think in a way, Abraham Lincoln's probably a very good model for this. His Gettysburg Address was an incredibly short speech. You know, he wasn't someone, he didn't do something like what I'm doing now, which is sort of bang on and on. You know, he was incredibly concise in his input. You know, Abraham Lincoln was the sort of leader who would have spent 80% of the time listening, maybe more, and a maximum of 20% of the time talking. And that's a very good start. So in terms of how do you create a learning community, I think there's a certain extent of what behaviors do you model directly yourself? Are you a teller, are you a hero leader, or are you a humble listener? And if it's the latter, then it's likely you've already got, in your own organization, you've probably already got a community of learning. If you welcome people's perspectives, you're really willing to genuinely listen to them rather than put your own agenda into the discussion, then it's highly likely that you're already a generative leader. I suppose one thing that you can think about is actually who is involved in that discussion? Is it just like-minded people who are easy to listen to because they're always agreeing? Or have you got people with different perspectives who will disagree, create a bit of friction, but also help you to refine more sophisticated solutions? That may be one thing you could think about in terms of creating that community of learning. It's not always about having easy conversations. If everybody's always agreeing, that's probably a problem, actually. It's communities where there's healthy disagreement. Okay, very good. As I said, so please do stay in touch, LinkedIn and all that. And if I didn't get to your question, my apologies. I think I'm out of time now and I need to hand over. But it's been delightful to come and talk to you all today. Thank you very much for your feedback and for the engagement and for the questions. And I hope you have an excellent day. Thank you very much.